So yeah, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Marcia Reid Fotheringham, co-chair at the Cumbria race. I think it's Equity Network now, is it, Marcia? I can see nods, thank you. I just want to check that I got that right. So co-chair at the Cumbria Race Equity Network. Marcia was born in London and raised, educated in Long Island, New York. She attended Hofstra University, Long Island, New York, and graduated with a BS Sociology, MS Psychology, and PD Family Therapy. In 1997, Marcia moved to Cumbria, UK, and worked for the NHS as a psychologist and family therapist for 10 years. Along with the husband, Jim, Marcia was the owner and director of 2 dental practices. They've since sold 1 practice and continue providing dental services in the other. From 2019/20, Marcia was honoured to be the High Sheriff of Cumbria and had a most successful year promoting Cumbria and Cumbrians. She's currently a trustee, director of Cumbria Victims Charity Trust Board, Cumbria Community Foundation Board, Multicultural Cumbria, Cumbria Opera Group, University of Lancaster Council, and Cumbria Race Equity Network, Carlisle Culture and Carlisle Cathedral Development Board. She's also patron for Awa's Cumbria and for British Energy Coast Business Cluster and a Deputy Lieutenant of Cumbria. Welcome to Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, I just need to make sure that I'm registering the same complaint that Anand made. It's not that it's after dinner, after lunch rather, it's that I'm the last speaker. So I want to congratulate everybody who's still with us. I hope that my speech is invigorating enough to keep you with me, which does mean, you know, I can't see you. I see nothing but letters on my screen. So I assume that if you need to get up and move, you will, but stay with me, okay? My assumption is that you may have questions at the end. You may not, we'll see. So I'm pleased, I'm really, really pleased to be here. My little system is going upside down. So it's still going upside down. Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you. For those who have listened to me before, and I know some of you have, I need to thank you for returning for a little bit more. Now, I had planned to review a tiny history of Black History Week, which, as we know, is Black History Month. However, because I'm the last speaker of the day, and because I wanted to end on time, I'm not doing that bit of my speech. So if you are one of those people who is unaware of Black History Month's history, please Google it. It's worth learning about. You need to know the most celebrated Black History Month was the one that occurred after the Black Lives Matter movement started. So the question I'm often asked, and the question I will answer, is, with all the things that have changed, is Black History Month still necessary? Now, I could say, because the Black Lives Movement was so global and it forced so much attention by all, I could say it's not necessary. We know things are changing. Employers know that racism is illegal and not acceptable. Policies are in place in almost all workplaces or organizations, and people are talking more about race and the effects of race as it has on people of difference and others. For me, most importantly, right now we have more allies than we've ever had before. However, I'm forced to say it's not enough. Black History Month is not a protest month. It's a month to educate and inform people about Black people and Black lives. Without this particular month, in some schools and/or locations, the notion of race, or more specifically, Black people, would never be discussed or brought up at all. So in your lifetimes, in our lifetime, change has happened. Overt racism is considered unacceptable, and it has decreased, even though it still happens. Obviously, football is a place we see it. Now, a friend of mine was planning to talk to his 9-year-old about relevant life things, and he said to me, "It's time for the talk." I understood what anyone of color would know. This meant talking about surviving as a young person of color. Now, you might be able to hear that I wrote my talk before the Sarah Everard murder took place. I would have said that most white people would not need to have the conversation about being safe in public with their children. while for people of color or difference, it's an almost daily conversation. I can sadly say that because of the incidents related to Sarah Everard's murder, almost all people are talking to girls and women, if not to men, about how to stay safe in public. This is not really progress. And of course, there will be the question that will come up about the power of the reaction to the Everard case and the lack of interest with almost no reaction when it's the death, murder, or assault involving a person of color. So back to my talk. Now, generally, while overt racism is much lower than it used to be, subtle racism and all that goes with it is still alive and healthy. I was at a posh event a couple of weeks ago, sitting in front of two women. They knew I was there. They openly talked about what they called, in quotes as they said it, the hard to reach population. It took me a while and more listening for me to realize they were talking about people of color. And you might guess that what they had to say was not pleasant. There are still too many instances of subtle or sophisticated or unsophisticated acts of racism in too many walks of life. I'm not going to go through more examples because all of us listening already know them. And generally, when it comes to discrimination, it's answered by a desire to appear equal. The comment, "I'm not racist," and everyone points me, at least, to the correct paperwork, the equality-focused policies and procedures. For many, they think that should be enough. So now that progress is finally being addressed, people of color like me want more. I'm learning too. We want equity, not the stated equality with no real possibilities. So what's the difference? Equality aims to ensure that everyone gets the same thing in order to enjoy full, healthy lives. Equity involves trying to understand and give people what they need to enjoy full, healthy lives. Equality gives you access to what should be the same. Equity is the active commitment to fairness, justice, and equality in the formulation of public policy, distribution of public services, implementation of public policy, and the management of all institutions serving the public. And for businesses, equity results in increased productivity, increased creativity, and profits. You don't have to believe me, listen to an and or look it up. The Equal Rights Act is an example of equality. Affirmative action, which many people don't like, is an example of equity. Many who dislike the BLM movement don't seem to realize that this movement actually expresses equity, not equality. In other words, BLM highlights the African American community in order to supplement for their lack of representation. Though often used interchangeably, equality and equity are quite different. Equality really does simply mean everyone is treated the same exact way, regardless of need or any other individual difference. Equity, on the other hand, means everyone is provided with what they need to succeed. Years ago, even up to last year, I used to talk about wanting policies or procedures that require equality. Well, that did happen. My current assessment is that policies are implemented without regard to how effective or equal they are for the population they are covering. So while the policies are usually based on equality, they are not equitable. So yes, it means in between my words, allowances may need to be offered to people of difference, Black, brown, and other differences. Now, this is not new. This is what happened when women joined the workforce. Amendments and accommodations had to be made. Maternity time, more flexible hours, and things like that had to be put in place. And at this point for women, there are now accommodations being considered for menopause and the related impact. When the disabled became a protected group, workplaces had to start providing accessible locations and ability aids to accommodate sight and/or hearing loss. This is also the same way that schools have had to change. Modern day schools have had to adapt to classrooms with constantly changing and expanding racial, cultural, linguistic, diversity, and the digital age, all situated in neighborhoods and regions with wide variations in resources and opportunities. It means that leadership development program staff and funders must also continually rethink and retool practices in order to appropriately adapt approaches. That is what happened with the distribution of laptops to schools during the pandemic. They were given out on the basis of need. They were distributed equitably, not equally. Now, these changes take time and could be costly, but these resolutions that I've described were considered mandatory because of our growing discontent with the way things had been going and because of the change in law. So this idea of accommodating is not new, but applying equity to the professional or work community may be a little new. Leaders do know that they need to accommodate these needs. But while our society is busy talking about equality, and we know it's not easy to accomplish equality and fairness, we know that people need different options to make their opportunities the same as another's. Again, this is equity. So what's needed is the presence from people of difference. And I gotta be honest, it's especially from the most marginalized group, people of color. We need to be present and seen in leadership roles with decision-making abilities. Let's face facts. It's been a long time coming. The authors of Leadership and Race believe, this is a quote, that people of color will continue to be under-recognized for their leadership contributions and underrepresented in leadership positions without more culturally inclusive leadership models. Current leadership thinking often misses the significance of racial or social identity. So, based on their thoughts, which you might guess I agree with, we should not be aiming to treat people or distribute resources equally. We should aim to do so equitably in order to reach equality. Now, the example they use, not my example, we cannot close the gender pay gap without tackling the inequity that is caused by men being considered more valuable than women in society. Similarly, we cannot defeat racial inequalities without approaching the inequity that people of color are less than white people. So here's the problem. There are 7 very involved steps to advance and embed racial equity across an organization. It includes really understanding what we're talking about by racial equity examples and the racial equity principles. It involves analysis of root causes, goes through to identifying strategies, targeting resources that address root causes of inequities, and learn to conduct equality and equity impact visions and the process for people to be involved in the situation that you are talking about as you develop strategies and policies. It is inclusive work for a number of months. It takes a business or an organization through a process that asks for different thinking to result in different, inclusive, and equitable solutions with successful outcomes. Now, how can a working business make time to do this? I can honestly say if an organization wants to do it, they will. It really should not wait until the notion of equity becomes the latest protest, fad, or law. I also know that it's actually imperative to do this because not much will change until equity is considered or obtained. Now, in Cumbria, we do have organizations like CREN, Cumbria Race Equity Network, which I'll talk about, AWAS, Anti-Racist Cumbria, and MCC, who are prepared to help individuals, businesses, and organizations. Now, as co-chair of CREN, I'm going to talk about them. Relative to business, CREN's methodology is to help organizations and business make the cultural change to be more inclusive, which will lead to providing equity within their organization or business. We will help implement those 7 steps that I referred to earlier. We will assist as much as we're allowed. However, this is an inclusive, long-term process that will require commitment and action from the decision makers of any organization. As we work with you, CREN will acknowledge growth and change as progress occurs within the organization or business. Our intent is to promote and support those organizations and businesses who are working toward equity. I know that our email address will be somewhere on the MCC site. So, the simple but hard bottom lines for all of us. Educate yourself on what major inequities there are now in our world and how they affect your community. Knowing where the issues lie is important to understanding how to tackle them. You can simply do this by reading the news, researching social issues, and speaking to activists or community leaders of different beliefs in different spaces. All of this will help when it comes to looking at and/or developing new policies and procedures. All of this will help develop more effective, equitable strategies. Now, if you're a person of color, especially if you're Black or brown, start to expect to become more included. Ask to be included. And yes, ask what it would take to be considered for leadership. And then, if that's what you want, follow those suggestions, questioning things along the way. Be prepared to give answers that in the past, because you knew no one was listening, you might not have given. It is time to speak up and to continue speaking up. If you're a leader, remember to include representatives who will be affected by what is being done, changed, or considered. You are the one who gives them a voice in the process. Listen and make it count. If you're a manager or a leader, you have to ask why your colleagues and your board look a lot alike. Why aren't they a diverse mix of people? Ask yourself, answer yourself, and do something about it. So, how does this very good but quick discussion tell us about Black History Month? In truth, it doesn't. Black History Month and contemplations about how to resolve the past and improve people's opportunities are 2 very, very different things. Black History Month is a celebration of the successes of Black people and people of difference. It's important because as a population, we're still not newsworthy unless it's something bad. Black History Month changes the agenda for a month. People are willing to tolerate the focus on Black and other people of color without rolling their eyes. For that month, TV and radio present shows that are focused on telling a story about someone who is Black and/or from difference. Watching these programs is important. They produce much pride for the Black and non-white population, if for no one else. And actually, I have to face the fact that I've not seen so many people of difference in movies, on TV shows, and/or in our commercials as we see nowadays. So bit by bit, we are arriving. But until we have an equitable world, we still need Black History Month and it should be celebrated in some simple way by everyone of every ethnic background and every family. Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, thank you very much, Marcia. Again, a fantastic session to end the day, and I think, and I'm sure everyone that stayed with us would agree. If you're okay, I'd like to just open up for any questions and comments from attendees, if that's all right. So if anyone would like to ask a question, if you could raise your virtual hand. I think we've got one. Is that Anand? Yeah, if you want to come in there, Anand.
Hi, Marcia. Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you very much for that. It was a learning process for me as well. I've heard about equity before, but as you must have heard my speech, I was talking about equality there, right? So it is a process for us leaders, including myself, to know more about this equity. And I was trying hard to understand, because up until a point I'm still thinking, what's the difference? But when you explain that laptop point to kids, or iPad to the kids, right? That then brought it home to me. So that is a fantastic explanation for that. The question I have, Marcia, this is more inward looking as people from a different background, right? We talk about Cumbria not having too many people from other backgrounds. What can we of different ethnic backgrounds do to encourage people from different backgrounds in the 5 top cities around us, right, a 100-mile radius? What can we do to encourage them to come over here, so that SMEs like myself have a bigger pool to employ from? It might not be directly related to what you mentioned, but from your experience, Marcia, I'm just trying to learn and see if we can do something about it rather than depending on somebody else to make that change.
No, it's a good question, Anand. And if anything, it's a question that I'm asked often, because the bottom line that I'm always told is, I've tried everything, I just can't encourage a diverse population to apply for jobs in Cumbria. Now, here's my point about this. We just listened to Naz. The NHS has been able to do it. So obviously, it is possible. What the NHS does really well, which I don't know if Naz knew this, but that business of talking and getting people to really understand where they are and how interested they are in helping people feel comfortable is the bit that also helps new employees come through their door. Because somebody like Naz will have family and friends who are not from here, who are more fit in with his ethnic background, who he will talk to. And the best PR is having somebody say, I'm there, I've survived, I'm okay. So there's something about learning to advertise and learning to recruit in a way that's more friendly to a diverse community. There are times when I've said to people, do you know what mosques are around? Do you know, if you were a stranger, where you'd go and eat whatever food it is that you would like? The answer is usually no. And I always say, when you're ready to encourage people of difference, you'll learn to find out. Because that has to be part of the exchange. The person who's coming to you is giving up what they know as familiar. We have to help them get some, not all, some of the familiarity back. And we have to do it in small ways. If anybody checked the chat, I sent Saj a message when she was talking, just about trying to get her foot through the door of the NHS. What she said was they gave 10 minutes, but they don't want the 10 minutes, they want longer. My feeling about that is, you take the 10 minutes, take those 10 minutes, and if anything, sort of on purpose, you go a little longer so that you get your point across. And it's the beginning of a process. And when you go longer and people don't like it, you explain that actually you should have been given a half hour, because that would have been a little bit better for you to work with. So it's a constant negotiation, but it's a constant trying to find out what your potential candidates would like. That is, again, what was done and is being done so successfully with women. Usually on the ad, you see right away, flexible work hours, work around childcare. You know that there's a desire to encourage you in. That is what has to happen when it comes to dealing with people who have differences, whatever that difference is. Does that answer your question, Anand?
It does, Marcia. It does. I do get the point where, especially the network which you mentioned, it is important, and I do feel that we ought to take that responsibility too, because the change can come from us.
Well, actually, because you speak so eloquently about it, and CREN is doing its work to try to figure out a way around Cumbria to do this, it would be great if at some point we had a conversation about that. I know Saji's going to come in and say, not before, but I figure I've got the floor, so I can say this right now, okay? Any other questions? I know she's giving me the finger. Any other questions? Then I'm going to turn it back over to Lee. Lee, it's been a long day. I got to tell you, for those people who hung in, nice job, because it has been a long day. We've learned a lot. We spent time together. I still don't like the business of not seeing you, but I know it's normal, and I now take advantage of it. But thank you very much for hanging in. Could you leave me some chat in the chat so that I know whether or not you felt it was clear, unclear? Did it make sense? Did it not make sense? Because if you're learning from me, I want to learn from you. Okay?
Thank you, Marcia. Yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity now to very quickly echo Marcia's points as well to everybody. So from behalf of Multicultural Cumbria and myself and the University of Cumbria, a huge thank you to all our guest speakers today. We appreciate people giving up their time to come and share their often personal stories as well, which I appreciate is not something that can be easy, especially when it's quite emotive and the topics that we're dealing with. So a huge thank you for that. Huge thank you for all our attendees, whether you attended for an hour this morning, an hour this afternoon, or you hung in for the full 6-7 hours, whatever it's been, it is really appreciated.